Welcome to the Zero to CCNA class. My name is Arpit Pandit, and we in this particular session we are just going to understand how exactly this class is structured, what can you get from this class, and how is it different from other courses that you see on the internet. How what exactly makes it unique, and what are the different structured approach that we are going to take to get our CCNA certification, and also become comfortable in some of the core technologies which are very important for not only for exam but also if you want to go for later for CCNP and CCIE, how these things can help. So first of all, let's talk about the course structure, how this course is designed, and how we are going to move ahead with this. So first of all, this course is going to be once a week, means one session per week. So one thing we had noticed in many of the other CCNA courses is that generally these were like bootcamp style courses where you go through everything within 5 to 7 days. So it's like 1 week bootcamp, maximum 2 weeks boot camps, and they go through all the technologies very fast, and including few practicals, not much because CCNA is mostly a theoretical exam, the multiple choice question. There are few labs called simulations in the exam, but not that many. So the practical approach is missing in from most of the classes, and also it goes very fast because so many people think CCNA is the basic level course or the starting level course, so you don't need to spend that much time. But it is actually the contrary. When you start a new technology like networking, or if you are new to networking and new to Cisco, you want to get started with certifications, it's very important to give more time to understanding the technologies, the concepts of these, and then also doing the ample practicals. Hands-on is extremely important. So we thought let's create a program where we go through each individual technology per week, giving complete concentration to that. For example, if we are starting a spelling tree protocol, we make sure that we start from scratch as if we have no knowledge of this technology, and we go all the way to the CCNA level, or I would also call it CCNA plus level, because you get a little bit more information than you would need just for the CCNA or any other topic, access control list security, or routing protocols, OSPF or BGP, or even advanced topics, wireless or programmability. We want to make sure that we go through everything in detail, and there are few topics where you have practicals as well. So we wanted to make sure that hands-on approach is taken. So when we take a particular topic, for example, if we are starting with OSPF, so we will make sure that we understand theory in the live Zoom session, everything that we need to know about OSPF, and then it will be followed by the lab. So in the lab, I am going to solve the lab, configure the lab for you step by step using the software that we have provided, EvenG. And since you will see exactly the theory part, and then immediately followed by the hands-on, where I will be configuring the lab, and I will not be configuring the lab quietly. I will be explaining each and every point, how exactly this needs to be done, why is it done in that way, and also what are the important show commands and everything to check things. So you will get the complete picture within the Zoom session about a topic. And some topics are bigger, like OSPF is actually a big topic. So we also have a couple of sessions for this, not just one session, and couple of labs where we go through the theory, followed by a step-by-step configuration by me. And then I'm going to send you the same lab along with the solution file so that you can also try it during the week. And the reason we kept it once a week is that so that you get ample time to practice it yourself, maybe watch the recording again and do the lab configuration a couple of times so you become quite comfortable with the technology before moving on to the next one. It is also followed by the Q&A within the session, and also if you have any question during the week when we don't have a session, you can also ask the question on our Facebook group. So that Facebook group is created specifically for this. So if you have any questions during the week, or if you get stuck somewhere, you can always ask the questions there, right? So the idea here is that you should have the mindset of learning and not testing yourself for the next 24 weeks. This course structure is in a way that we go through every single technology. So that time you should have the mindset of learning, even when you are doing the lab. So I will do the lab step by step, explaining everything. You will have the recordings for those as well. And that's the same reason why I also send you the solution file along with the configuration lab file, because I want you to have the mindset of learning even when you are doing the lab on your own. So it is not expected to remember everything immediately, and to be able to do the lab without checking the solution. That's not expected in any of these weeks. You just need to practice as much as possible, reinforcing the concepts, because when you are doing the practical as well, that time also you are learning. You are understanding exactly how the things are done and how they are applied, and when we configure it, how do they actually respond, what is the solution we are looking for. And we answer basically three important questions for every single technology. What is this technology? Why do we need this? And of course, the most important question, how to configure it. So we always take that approach. That's why we kept it only once a week, so that we have ample time to do the practical as well, right? So the course will be or the sessions will be once a week, 1 hour, 1.5 hour to 2 hours per session. Generally what happens is that I always say these classes are topic driven, not time driven. So some topics you will see might take less than 2 hours. Some topics might take a little bit more than 2 hours as well. So it depends topic by topic. And that's why the class timing is slightly flexible. It's not rigid. It's not strictly 2 hours, right? It could be plus or minus depending on the topic. So this is going to be a 24 weeks course. And the reason we have spread it out like this is because we wanted to give ample time to the core technologies. You will see that this CCNA exam used to be called CCNA routing and switching. And there was a reason for that, because routing and switching, these are the core technologies that you need to learn to get anywhere into networking. And I always emphasize this, that CCNA is the most important certification, even if you don't want to go for CCNP and CCIE. Maybe you want to go for system administration or security administration, cyber security, or cloud engineering. Anything you want to do later, the knowledge of core infrastructure technology, routing and switching, actually helps immensely. So that's why this is a very in-depth theory class. We will make sure that we understand all the topics in sufficient detail, I would say, uh, up to CCNA level, and even CCNA plus, you can call it, because we will also cover a few more things than you will need for CCNA. So that makes you very comfortable with the technologies and very confident when it comes to answering questions and configuring these technologies. Also, we back up the theory with multiple practical labs. So you will see that for every topic, we will have a lab. So just to give you an example, let me show you one of the labs, just to show you that what we will do week by week. So whether it is VLANs and trunking, STP, Ether channel, router basic config, or OSPF, IP version 6, PGP, we will have separate labs for each one of those. So the labs are actually structurized just like a CCI level lab. I mean, not in the complexity. Complexity will be on the CCNA level, but just like when you go for a CCI exam, these are practical exams. So they ask you questions step by step, instructions like do this and this and this, and then a particular expected outcome is required, right? Similarly, we will have labs for everything like STP. I'll tell you to open the lab into EVNG, the software that we use, and which I'm also going to explain in few minutes. And then I start explaining exactly what you need to do: configure VLANs, configure trunking, configure subnetting on the PCs or system, and ultimately there should be communication, and then some spanning tree level questions as well. Now, along with this, you will see that I'm also going to send you the solution file. So the solution file actually contains the answers for each question. So you can see if I'm asking you to create VLANs, how exactly you can do it. That is also mentioned here. If I'm asking you to configure trunking, what exactly is the command that you can use for trunking, and so on, right? So every week it will be the same structure, where we will have a particular lab. Like for example, if it is IP version 6, the questions will be according to that. So like this is the IPv6 solution. Let me open the IPv6 lab. So again, you can see that there will be instructions, what needs to be done, which topology you need to open, because there are multiple topologies in EVNG, and what exactly do you need to configure. Of course, backed with the solution file as well. So the idea is that you will have in-depth theory, so you will know exactly what technologies we have covered, and you will have a good understanding of the technology. And then that will be backed by these labs, which I am going to solve step by step within the Zoom session, explaining exactly why are we doing that we are doing in that particular instruction. And then, of course, this will be followed by sending you the lab so you can do it along with the class recordings that you have. So this makes sure that you have everything that you need for your CCNA journey, and it is backed by the instructor support. So my support will be there. So in case if you have any question during the week also, you can ask on the Facebook group, and there will be many people who will be more than happy to answer there as well. It's a good community of students. And of course, I will also be answering there. So if there are some questions which I answer there, other students can also benefit, or the answer to other students, you can benefit from those question and answer as well, right? So that's the structure, or that's the logic that we're using in this one. So as I mentioned, lab PDF will be sent after the session, and along with the lab solution file. Both will be sent every week after the class. And this is a full hands-on approach, as you can see, because although CCNA does have some simulation questions in the exam, but they are not many. For example, you might get 4 to 5 simulation questions, maybe say about security, about routing protocol configuration, maybe some switching questions, but not for every single topic. But we want to make sure that whatever we cover, we actually cover everything that we can actually practicalize as well. We can lab it as well, right? So it's a completely hands-on course, right from the starting, like when we start from next week, we will immediately start with the practical aspect. Well, except the first session we will do next week, which is going to be IP addressing and subnetting. That's a theoretical question, but we still have a lab for subnetting, because subnetting is something you will see is very important throughout the course. It's not just the subnetting questions in the exam, but subnetting is used everywhere. So when you go further in your life in your Cisco journey, if you do CCNP, even CCIE, subnetting will still be used there. Even if you decide to do completely different thing, like maybe you want to do cloud, you want to do AWS certifications, you will see they also use subnetting to separate the resources within the cloud. Or in cybersecurity, you are using Kali Linux or certified ethical hacker course, you need to know how exactly networking and subnetting is done. So that's why I give utmost importance to subnetting in this course. We want to make sure that even if you don't know anything about subnetting, you should become very, very comfortable by the end of this course. And how we approach for that is not only we will have a dedicated week, like next week will be for IPv4 for addressing and subnetting, but also for every single lab that we will do throughout this course, we will include subnetting somewhere or the other. Like if we are, even if you are doing a configuration of GRE, generic routing encapsulation tunnel, we will make sure that we include subnetting on some level. Or if you are doing BGP, border gateway protocol, we somehow include subnetting there as well. So subnetting is something that you will be practicing in this course throughout the 24 weeks duration. So apart from that, from the later week, you will see every single session will have a hands-on lab as well, right? And the topologies that we are going to use are actually based on EVNG. So what exactly is EVNG? EVNG is a network emulation software. So not to be confused with network simulation. Simulation basically means that you are simulating the router or switch. So you are not actually a router or switch. It's just a software which is configured or programmed to simulate or act like a router. When you type the commands, the output will be similar to a router. Same thing for switches, but they are not actually the routers or switches. So you don't get exactly 100% support for all the commands and features. On the other hand, EVNG is an emulator. Emulator means that you actually use the real iOS images in the backend, just that the front end is not a hardware. So instead of buying a hardware switch or a hardware router, which has the operating system inside it. You are using the virtualized routers and switches, which have the same operating systems in the backend. So you get all the commands that you would see or you would find into the real routers and switches, right? That's why we are using EVNG. And it's actually very easy also to set up and use. It's a completely GUI based, graphical user interface based solution. And one thing you will see is that in the very first week, when you go to the Zero to CCNA portal, 0 to IT.com, and then you log into your account, in the first week, the very first video you will see is also about how to set up and use EVNG. So that video is also very important. You should definitely watch it if you haven't yet this week, and make sure that you understand the basics of EVNG, although which are very simple, because ultimately it's a virtual machine, a Linux virtual machine, which we install into VMware and VMware Workstation or Workstation Player. And from that point onward, it is just a GUI to start, stop devices, and save the configuration. How exactly you can do all these things. That's what you will learn into that video. We will cover a little bit of this here as well, but the detailed instructions about EVNG setup and usage is there right there into the first week of the recordings, right? Now, one thing you will notice that when people start preparing for CCNA on their own, or if they are using one of the other courses like bootcamp style courses, one big issue they always face is how do I practice it, right? How do I practicalize it? So one of the solution would be to buy the real gears like hardwares and like routers and switches, creating your own rack and buying cables and connecting them. So that not only that will be more expensive, but also not all features are supported by all routing models. So you need to understand that which routers will be correct, which switches will be correct, and also you need to keep on updating it, upgrading it if there are new things that needed to be used there. And if you want to do it with the virtual machines like EVNG or like emulators like EVNG on your own, that also becomes or takes a little bit of learning curve, because EVNG is just the emulator, right? You need to procure the real router and Cisco or switches images, operating system images from somewhere. You need to upload them into EVNG, which is actually a Linux operating system. So you need to know a little bit of Linux commands as well to copy them. Then you cannot use them directly. You have to license them. So you need to know the licensing procedure as well. You need to use a Python program to create a license file, and that is needed. And once everything is done, and when you open it in the GUI, it is completely blank by default. So you can go ahead and create the topologies that you want by fetching some routers and switches, connecting them to each other. So that becomes another challenging part, that okay, what kind of topologies can we create to leverage all the points that I need to learn for a particular technology like OSPF, BGP, or NAT, or NTP, and all these things, right? So we wanted to make sure that we take away all these complexity away from our students and let them concentrate on the things that matter, the technologies, right from day one, right? That's why I sent you the OVA, which is a complete package. It has the EVNG software, so you can import the OVA into the VMware. What will you get is you will get a fully loaded EVNG, which already has all the routers and switches iOS images. They're already fully licensed, and the topologies are pre-built. So we are using some topologies which are already configured, connected. Sorry, not configured, already connected, and you can start using them right away. So you can just boot them and start configuring your practicals about VLANs, the trunking, VTP, STP, or any routing protocols or any IP services. Everything you will be able to do on these topologies. So we take all the complexities away, and it's not that you can't do it. EVNG is also a free software. You can definitely do everything on your own as far as the practical setup is concerned. But it takes a lot of time and efforts which you could have, which you can put into your CCNA learning, right? That's why we provide you the OVA, which covers everything. So also, whatever we are going to cover in this course, every week, that recording will be available for lifetime. So lifetime access will be there for recordings. For example, we have some people who have bought our CCNA course back in 2018 as well. So even those people also, or those guys also have the access to the new recordings, and it will be for lifetime. So whenever there is a new topic or a new feature added to CCNA course, we cover that topic. We actually upload the recordings to the portal. And of course, it is available to all the students who have purchased CCNA at any point of time. So that is another extremely important aspect of this, that the recordings are available for lifetime. And as I mentioned, we use the EVNG. So EVNG you need to import into VMware. Now we recommend to use Windows machine. So if you don't have a Windows operating system, we recommend to use that, because if you're using Linux or Mac OS, you can definitely use it. But since we are not using it, so we might not be able to support you fully if you have any issues, or if you are feeling or if you're experiencing some issues in importing or setting up EVNG, right? But if you're using Windows PC, then you can install the VMware Workstation or Workstation Player, which is the free one. We recommend to have at least 8 gig of RAM on your PC, so that you can give 3 to 4 gig to EVNG, and that will be actually more than sufficient for CCNA level practicals that we are going to do. And topologies are already set in EVNG, so when you import that OVA in VMware and you set up the EVNG, you will get all the topologies pre-built. And OVA file, I think I have already sent you. So in case if you have any issue in importing that, you can definitely watch the first video on the portal. And if that also doesn't help, or if you get stuck, you can definitely get in touch with me or Christian and let us know if you are experiencing any issues. So you will have this whole week to set this up, because we start, to be honest, you do have a couple of weeks, because next week also we are going to start with IP addressing and subnetting, where we will have a lab, but it's a theoretical lab about subnetting. So you don't necessarily need EVNG for next week as well. So you have some time, no worries. You can set up everything properly. All right, I see a question from Tommy. EVNG is only supported on Windows. So EVNG basically is, as I mentioned, it's an OVA file, right? It's a virtual machine. So you can also install this on Linux, or if you're using KVM on Linux, or if you're using Mac OS, you can use VMware Fusion, which is the VMware variation for Mac OS. So you can actually use them on those also. It's not just Windows. But we recommend Windows because that's what we are using day to day. So we exactly know if there are any issues, how to quickly fix them. So it just reduces the fixing time. If you are using Mac OS or Linux machine and using some different software for simulation or emulation, it might not be able to help you right away there. That's the point, right? I see a question from Tommy. Is it like packet tracer or what's the equivalent? So yeah, you can say it's like packet tracer, but packet tracer is a simulator, right? That's the difference. Packet tracer doesn't have the real operating system in the backend. Cisco has created a software which will actually respond in the same way as if a router or switch would respond. But that means there are limitations. You can't use it for everything. But EVNG, as I mentioned, it is just the front end which interacts with the real operating system of the router or the switch in the backend. So you can use it for the full features of a router or a switch. For example, we use EVNG in CCNP as well, even all the way up to CCIE. For example, in CCIE, we have SDN or SD-WAN, where we use software-defined WAN. Even that can also be emulated in EVNG. So EVNG is a very powerful software and very easy to use. So you can actually compare it to GNS3 as well. You know, GNS3 is another emulator which can actually interact with the real operating system images. But GNS3 had the issue that it did not have good support for switching. So EVNG actually fixed that. Now, not only routers, but switching also, you have support for all the switching commands which are there. So you have everything that you need for your CCNA, CCNP, or even CCI level requirements, right? And as I mentioned, the recommended RAM for system should be 8 gig. So if you have an 8 gig system, that's perfect. If you have 4 gig system only, then also you can use it, but it might be a slightly slower, because you have to give only like 2 gig RAM to EVNG, which should be fine for most of the labs. I don't see any issue, but 8 gig is recommended. And for basic setup, when you see the first video on the portal, you will get the detailed information. But basically, when the OVA that I sent you, when you import this in VMware, You need to just adjust the RAM according to your system, depending on how much you want to assign to EVNG. And don't worry, if you have, let's say, 8 gig RAM and you are assigning 4 gig to EVNG, it's not going to use all 4 gig immediately. It gradually starts using more RAM when you start spinning up more and more routers, powering up more routers and switches, and start configuring more things on those devices, right? So it's not immediately reserving everything. And for the connectivity, you need to set the interface to net. So when you import the OVA and you go to the properties of that OVA, you will see, or that virtual machine, you will see the network adapter type. It will show you either bridged net or one of the VMNet options. So you need to select the net option here, right? This will allow you to connect to your This will allow your EVNG to receive an IP address from your host system, and also it will allow you to connect to the devices easily using a browser from your host device. Like I'm using Windows 11, so I can just open a browser after booting up the EVNG, and I am very easy to connect to the GUI of EVNG after that, right? And as you can see that when you select the memory, it allows you to select how much memory you want to assign to this EVNG device. So let's say if you have 8 gig in your laptop, you can give 4 gig to EVNG, something like that, right? You can do that. So just to show you an example, when you import the OVA in VMware, and how can you do that is when you open the VMware Orchestration Player, it will be something like this, and you can go to the player file and you can click on open, or you can also press Ctrl+O to open. This actually opens up the window where you can import the OVA. So when you go to the open and you go to the one of the locations, let's say 02 CCNA, and there you can see that there'll be file like this, OVF file or OVA file, where you can double click on it, and it is going to ask you a name for it, and it will be imported. Once it is imported, let's say one of the devices, then you can go to the edit virtual machine setting, and in the virtual machine setting, that's what I was talking about. So network adapter type should be net, right? Bridge net, host only, or custom. So select net, and for memory, make sure that you have given at least 4 gig to the EVNG. More is better, but for CCNA level, actually, you will not see much difference. 4 to 8 gig is more than enough for this. Once that is done, you can click on the play the virtual machine to boot up EVNG. And first time when you boot EVNG, you will actually get a screen like this. You can see where it is showing you a login screen. Because EVNG is basically a Linux operating system. It's based on Ubuntu. So it is asking you to log into the Linux operating system. But one more thing you notice here is before the login credential, you have an IP address shown. It is asking you that it is telling you that you can use this URL HTTP and then the IP address 79.130 to open the GUI of EVNG in a browser. So for your practice, for your labs that you will do week by week, you don't need to log in here. You just need to boot the EVNG and you come to this login prompt, you note down the IP address, and that's it. Then you open this IP address in the browser. You don't need to log in here at all. You need to log in here if you had to copy the iOS files to the Linux operating system, license them, and some basic maintenance in the backend. But as I mentioned, it is all done for you already. You don't need to worry anything. But just in case, if you are curious and you want to log in, you can see the username and password is shown right here in the very first line. Default username is root, and the password is EVE or EU, right? So you can actually log in with that. But I think in CCNA, we have changed the password to Karotul. So the username is root and the password is CAROTUL, Karotul, and then you can log in. But no need, as I mentioned, you just need to boot the EVNG, make sure it gets an IP address. And if you have set the network type to net, you will see an IP address here. And you just note down the IP address from this one, right? So what you do with this, you open this in one of the browsers you have in your host machine. Like this was the IP, right? 192.168.79.130. So you open this, which will actually bring you to the login screen on the GUI. And for you, the username is admin for the GUI, and the password is EVE. or EU that you see here, the name of the software, right? So admin and EU, these are the username and password. You log in, and when you log in, you actually get to this screen here, where you will see some files, which are the topologies, different topologies that we will use throughout this course. For example, there is a topology called 0 to CCNA. Then there's a topology called 0 to CCNA underscore BGP, 0 to CCNA underscore DSCP, DNS, NTP, IPv6, OSPF, and routing. Some of these are actually I created later, so you will not see them, like 0 to 0 Saturday that was just created later. Same thing for HCL. So most of the core topologies are these, which we are going to use throughout this course. For example, 0 to CCNA, when you click on it, you have the option here on the right hand side to open the topology. And when you click on open, it opens something like this, where you see a bunch of routers, switches, and PCs connected to each other in different environment, right? So this is the topology we will use for most of our practical switching and routing and security practicals. And we keep the topology same throughout the course. And there is a reason for this, because this is not a design course, right? I don't want you to spend time or waste time in every week learning a new topology and learning what new IP addresses are going to be used. Instead, we use the same structure. Yes, IP addresses might be different because we want to practice subnetting every week. But apart from that, you will see the same topology will be used throughout the course, so that you can concentrate on the technology rather than on the design of the topology. And as you can see that we will be using three branches: branch 1, branch 2, and branch 3. And router 3 here in the middle is acting as an internet router. In the middle, you can see, which will be connecting all these three branches, right? So if you concentrate on a particular branch, you see we have some routers here, some switches. And for the computers also, we are using routers, but we just disable routing on them. So they are acting as the computers. The reason we do that is because in the labs, you will just need to ping from one location to another location to make sure that your routing and switching is properly configured. So the ultimate test will be to ping end to end, like from here, from PC1, if I can ping all the way to branch 2, let's say PC8, and all the way to router 7 here in branch 3, that means our end-to-end communication is working properly. Just to give you an example, right? So we are going to use this topology. And every week when I send you a particular lab, let's say if I'm sending you a BGP lab, so you will see that the very first thing it says in every lab is open a particular topology. So here you can see that it is asking you to open the 0 to CCNA underscore BGP topology, right? So you will actually go to the EVNG, close this lab, and you see that there is a 0 to CCNA underscore BGP topology, which you will see is the same when you open it. It's not something new, but has some extra information like what BGP autonomous system number will be used. Like this is autonomous system number 100, this is 200, this is 300, and then this one is 400. And what other routing protocols we are using internally. So this information will be provided apart from the topological information that we already had, right? And then the next thing you see in the lab is it will always ask you to wipe all nodes first. Wiping nodes means to remove all the configuration it had and go back to the base configuration. So in some topologies, when we have to practice switching, there might not be any configuration. But in some topologies, like when it comes to routing, we might have IP addressing already configured, or maybe the VLANs and trunking already configured, because we want to concentrate on routing part. So there are different base configurations pre-configured, and that is something you can go back to by using the wiping all nodes, right? And it also shows you how to do it. And then from point number 3, we start the actual lab where we configure everything that we need to do for BGP and or whatever the topic in hand, right? So when you watch the video from the portal, the first video, EVNG video, you will see how to start the devices, how to stop the devices, how to save the configuration. So let's say if the lab is pretty big and you want to do it maybe in 2 days, half of the lab you want to configure today, other half you want to configure tomorrow. So how do you make sure that your configuration is properly saved and it will not go back to the base config when you start it again tomorrow? So you want to continue from the point you were doing yesterday. So how to save the configuration so that you don't lose your progress, and also how to go back to the base config if you want to start all over from the scratch. So all these things will be explained into that video about EVNG as well, right? So this software is going to be used for practical purpose, and as you see that I already can send you the software, so you have a couple of weeks until we do the subnetting practical, that you can set it up and make sure everything is working smoothly. All right, talking about the CCNA topics. So there are some core topics that we are going to cover in this course. Throughout the course, we want to make sure that the basics and the advanced both are covered. So for example, we'll start with basics of networking, IPv4 addressing and subnetting, very important. And then we'll go to VLANs, VTP, Ether channel, and spanning tree protocol. So all the switching technologies we are going to cover, which are important. Routing part, we will actually start with router basic config and secure access to the router using secure shell. Static and default routing. So when we start routing, we will understand how exactly routing is configured. What is the difference between static and dynamic routing, and what exactly is static and default routing? In the dynamic routing, we will cover OSPF version 2, and also IPv6 addressing, and BGP will also be covered. So you will see that RIP and EIGRP, although they are not covered here in the routing protocols because they are no longer part of the CCNA exam. But if you go to the recordings on the portal, you will see there are some recordings for RIP and also for EIGRP from the older classes, right? So if you are interested in into those protocols, you can definitely watch those recordings as well, although it's not needed for the existing or the current CCNA curriculum. In IP services, we are also going to cover GRE, NET, NTP, TNS, DHCP, quality of service, SNMP, TFTP, FTP. These things are called IP services because your infrastructure should already be set, means your routing and switching should already be working properly before you can add extra features with these technologies. Like NET allows you to translate your private IP address to a public IP address, or network time protocol helps you to synchronize time information between devices, or SNMP is for network monitoring. So these things can only work if your infrastructure is already properly set, right? Same thing for IPv6 addressing. IPv6 addressing is very similar to IP addressing, just the structure is different, the length is different, and few commands will be different. So we will see that as well, how we can configure it, and the routing over IPv6, how to configure it. So we'll start from scratch. We'll understand exactly what is IPv6 addressing, the structure of the addressing, types of addressing, how to configure it on the routers and switches. Everything will be covered right from the scratch. We'll also cover security features both on layer 2 and layer 3. So on layer 2, we have some security features, for example, IP source card or dynamic ARP inspection, or we also have the port security features. So we'll see that. And on the layer 3 level, we'll see access control list to control the communication between different devices. Wireless basics, virtualization basics, and automation and programmability. So these topics you will see, these are not the practical topics in the exam. So in the CCN exam also, they don't actually ask any practical questions. So they will not ask you any simulation based on these, but you need to understand the basics of these things as well for the exam or for the multiple choice questions. So we have our pre-recorded videos for these, which you can watch and which will cover everything that you need to know for the CCNA exam. In this practical class, we are not going to cover these because there are no labs to follow. It is just the basic idea, how exactly the basic wireless configuration works, virtualization works, and some of the automation and programmability things. So these things we do cover, but in the pre-recorded videos. So when you go to the portal at the end of the class, these videos will be open for you, so you can definitely go through them. And the support will still be there, although there are no labs. You don't need labs for these topics for CCNA, but support will still be there. That means if you have any question while watching the videos or after the videos, you can definitely get in touch with me using Facebook, or within the video you will see a comment section on the portal where you can also ask your questions. Did I see a question from Tommy? So are we supposed to watch the past recording before every class? Because I don't have any pre-understanding of networking. So that is absolutely fine, Tommy, because when I say that we are going to start from basics of networking, like you see the very first point, I am going to start from scratch. I'm going to explain you networking right from the concept of what exactly networking is, enabling communication, the important protocols. But yes, one thing I would suggest that in the first week, so like later you will see that when we go to the more advanced topics, you don't need to watch the recordings beforehand because I will cover everything in within the Zoom session. But for the first week, I would suggest you that there are some topics which there are some videos you will see in the first week, like basics of networking, OSI and TCP/IP model, IP addressing and subnetting. So if you watch them, that will be actually a good idea because then in the class we will cover them again, or especially the networking and addressing part. So that will be a good revision in the beginning, and you might already have some questions which can be answered within the class. So that would be recommended at least in the initial part, right? Later you can actually completely rely on our live sessions. You don't need to worry about watching them. Although if you do watch them beforehand, that's always going to be an added advantage, but it's not required, right? So I hope that answers your question. So talking about the exam, so CCNA exam code is 200-301. They recently have upgraded it to version 1.1 with with some minor changes here and there, some finer details, but mostly the content remains same. And this exam actually is a 120 minutes exam. So it's a 2 hours exam. If you are from a non-native English speaking country, then you might get 30 minutes extra. Uh, but actually 2 hours is also enough for this exam because you get the most of the questions are theoretical questions, means MCQs or multiple choice questions, drag and drop questions where you need to drag from the left hand side to the right hand side, whatever exactly is the matching points, tables matching, and simulation. Simulations is are the labs we were talking about, where you need to really click on the devices and start configuring them. Maybe use show commands to check something or configure. Go to the config mode to configure something. So for that, this course is going to help you immensely because throughout these 24 weeks, we will do so many practicals that you will become very comfortable with the Cisco switches and routers, the TLI, and the command line infrastructure. So in the exam, you will have around 50 to 60 questions, but depending on which set you get, you might get like 2 to 4 simulations also within the exam. And these questions are weighted, means simulations or the practical questions have more weight. So you cannot pass the exam by skipping all the simulations. You might think, okay, only 4 to 5 questions are simulations, so let's skip those and just do the other 55. You cannot pass exam with that. Simulations have very high scoring, so that's why practical knowledge and the practical configuration becomes extremely important, right? Now, how this program can help you. So as we have already talked about these points, that all the important theory is covered, multiple labs to start practicing very early. The course is actually spread for 6 months or 24 weeks to have ample practice time. And of course, my support will be there throughout the duration. So anytime you have any question within the Zoom session, we will always have a Q&A at the end, a short Q&A. And during the off time where we don't have the class during the week, you can definitely ask question also on the Facebook group. And the labs PDFs along with the solution will be provided, as I mentioned, and you get the lifetime access to the recordings. So you don't need to worry that exactly if you lose, if you maybe did not join a session or you want to go through something again, you always have access to these things, right? Finally, about myself. So I have two CCIs. In the one is in routing and switching, and now it is called enterprise infrastructure. Before it used to be called routing and switching, and second is in service provider. And I have more than 16 years of training experience. Now actually it's almost 18 years of training experience. And I have taught Microsoft, Juniper, Linux, of course CCNA, CCNP, CCIE, AWS cloud engineering, and also some of the topics which are more niche, more specific topics in the technology, where we talk about the MPLS, traffic engineering, or quality of service kind of classes. I also have good practical experience because I work as a consultant to some organizations, especially service providers. So I always keep an eye on particular technologies which are more used, and comparing to other technologies which are less popular now. So accordingly, I also include some knowledge in the classes from that. So that also can help. And although it does sound like a cliche, but training is my passion. Me and Krishan both. So we definitely like to help people. And the objective is always to make sure that you feel comfortable with the technology and we don't rush anything. So when we start a topic, we make sure that we start from the very basics. Like if you have no idea about a particular topic, don't worry. We'll start with the structure of why, what and how. So what, why and how. So what is this technology we are talking about? Why do we need this? What does it solve? And then of course, how to configure it. So we cover all this, the aspect of the technology. All right. So with that, let's get started. So thank you very much.